With a body count of 18, the subject of today's story is one of the most feared things in Kentucky, currently serving a life sentence in the Kentucky Historical Society. The Conjured Chest, as it has come to be known, has been released only once since being obtained by the Kentucky Historical Society, and that was to travel to Las Vegas in 2015 to be viewed by paranormal investigator Zach Baggins for his Travel Channel series Deadly Possessions. Okay, I'll bite. Let's see what this story is all about. Everyone loves a good, strange, weird, or bizarre story. Well, welcome to the American South, where dark legends and haunted history lurk around every corner. Where superstition, folklore, and a touch of backwoods magic blend with everyday culture. Some say, in order to survive. This is Dixie After Dark. According to family legend, wealthy plantation owner Jeremiah Graham was busy making preparations for the arrival of his firstborn child in the 1830s. Among all of the chaotic work being done, converting one of his rooms into a new nursery, Mr. Graham commissioned one of his slaves, identified only as Remus, to construct a chest of drawers. With painstaking precision, an Empire-style mahogany chest of drawers was crafted. 4 drawers in total, the top one being curved and extended. The piece is decorated with leaf designs hand-carved at the top and extensive scroll-worked columns. For whatever reason, though, Mr. Graham was not happy with the chest and took out his displeasure on Remus, severely beating him. Remus ended up dying from his injuries. This senseless act angered the rest of the slaves, and they decided to get revenge in a most peculiar way. A curse was placed on the chest of drawers using dried owl's blood. The chest of drawers was then moved to the new nursery. The birth of the child eventually came, as well as its death. The child died in infancy, allegedly, because its clothes had been placed in the cursed item's drawers. The chest of drawers would then go on to plague the descendants of the Graham family with death and misfortune every time it was used. Jeremiah Graham's twin brother, Jonathan, ended up having a son. The child's clothing was stored in the chest. Then, on his 21st birthday, he was stabbed and killed by a servant. A sister-in-law of both Jeremiah and Jonathan Graham, Amanda Winchell Graham, then had the chest of drawers stored away in the attic. Years later, Amanda allowed a family member, Catherine Winchell, and her new husband, John Ryan, to live on the land belonging to the Grahams. The chest was found in the attic and used by the couple. Shortly afterwards, their farmland suffered and they lost almost everything they had. John Ryan planned to go to New Orleans to find work, only to die in an accident on the way. Wife Catherine died shortly afterwards. Also, a niece, Louise Gregory, child of Eliza Ryan and John David Gregory, died at the age of 10 years old. Eliza and David Gregory's only surviving son, Ernest Gregory, later married Stella Stonecipher. Stella put her wedding dress in the chest, only to die within 2 years of their wedding. Another relative, Mabel Louise Whitehead, came to live with Eliza and John, later marrying Wilbur Harland. In 1901, Mabel and Wilbur had a baby named Chester and used the chest of drawers in the nursery. Chester died at 2 weeks old. A few years later, and not being aware of the curse, Wilbur stored his own clothes in the chest, then dying in 1905. The chest then changed hands within the family, back into the Gregorys. John David Gregory's nephew, Emmett, acquired the chest and placed a treasured gift in there, a knitted scarf and gloves from his mother, Lucy. In December 1909, while working for the railroad, Emmett stepped off of a train and fell through a trestle, 20 feet to his death. When Eliza Gregory's husband, John David Gregory, died in 1908, Eliza rearranged the home and moved the chest into her own room. Within 7 years, Eliza Gregory would take her own life. The chest then moved with Eliza and John David Gregory's granddaughter, Virginia Carey Hudson Cleveland, and her husband, Curtley Cleveland. They put their upcoming baby's clothes in the chest. The child was born prematurely and died the same day on August 8, 1915. Virginia and Curtley Cleveland did go on to have 2 more children, the second being Anne Carey Cleveland. Anne's clothing was eventually placed in the chest, and shortly after, Anne was struck with polio around 1929. Although she recovered, Anne suffered from lingering symptoms the rest of her life. Virginia and Curtley Cleveland's oldest daughter, Virginia Hudson Cleveland, had her wedding clothes placed in the chest after their wedding in 1943. In December of the following year, her husband, Wilbur Brister, was rushed to the hospital for an appendectomy, where he died from an overdose of ether. Virginia and Curtley's neighbor, Herman Moore Jr., at one point had his hunting clothes put in the chest somehow, only to die in a gunshot accident later that day. Virginia and Curtley's youngest son, Richard, then started using the chest. Less than a week later, he was stabbed at school. By this point, through family tree research and simply putting 2 and 2 together, Virginia Cleveland had started to figure out what was going on. After finding accounts of the initial curse, she turned to her lifelong maid, Sally, for help, hoping that she had some knowledge of how to reverse the curse. As luck would have it, Sally did. Sally told Virginia she needed a dead owl, brought unasked by a friend. Then she had to take the leaves of a willow tree that had been planted by a friend, 1 leaf for every victim, and boil the leaves for 1 full day in the sight of the owl. Then she would need to put the liquid in a jug and bury it under a flowering bush with the handle of the jug facing east. Virginia was warned, though. If everything worked, either Sally or Virginia herself would die before all of the leaves from the flowering bush fell in the fall. Virginia knew she had to go through with it, regardless, or else the chest would continue claiming victim after victim. She followed the instructions to a T. That September, the maid Sally died, a type of self-sacrifice, if you will, and became the Conjured Chest's last victim. Feathers from the dead owl were placed in the top drawer of the chest, along with written instructions on how the curse was broken, just in case. Still, Virginia never allowed the chest to be used again. A later descendant, Virginia Carey Hudson Maine, would hear the stories of the curse from parents and grandparents. She knew further action needed to be taken, so she donated the chest to the Kentucky Historical Society to ensure that it would never be used again. Extensive research was then performed, and all of the legends and people related to the chest legend was verified. Miss Maine's daughter, Beverly Maine Kinzel, accompanied members of the Kentucky Historical Society and the chest of drawers itself to Las Vegas in 2015 when it appeared on the Travel Channel series Deadly Possessions. The Cursed Chest of Drawers appeared on Season 1, Episode 2, with the original owl feathers and written instructions on how to break the curse still in the top drawer. Interestingly enough, their brief investigation did uncover some anomalies that seemed to point to the spirit of Eliza Gregory, perhaps still lingering with the chest or simply following her descendant, Miss Kinzel. Eliza Gregory is the family member that took her own life on April 4, 1915. In the interview with Zach Baggins, Beverly Maine Kinzel recounts last seeing the chest of drawers in the 1970s, before it was unveiled on the show itself. She states, "I was always afraid of it. Before I understood exactly what the story was, I was always afraid of it as a child because I knew it was associated with death and life." When asked why her mother donated the chest, Miss Kinzel says, "I think her reasons were complex. It's certainly historical. It goes back to sometime in the early 1800s, and someone she loved died in order to take off the conjure. I don't think she would turn it loose. I mean, imagine putting it on the curb, knowing that someone might put items in it and then die. She felt it needed to be preserved, but to keep it away from innocent people in a place that would make it very clear that it wasn't to be used." Other than this brief outing, the Conjured Chest has been housed with the Kentucky Historical Society in their museum since 1975, and since the completion of breaking the curse and the death of Sally, no other events or deaths have been reported that could be associated with the chest. Despite this, the Kentucky Historical Society is careful to keep anyone from touching the Conjured Chest, much less placing anything within its drawers. Many of the members have sly grins when asked if they believe in the legends, but those expressions quickly go away if asked if they themselves would ever place anything within the chest. Yeah, play it cool until the rubber meets the road. Ain't that always the way?